What's up? What's up? Welcome to another episode of the Digital and Social Media Sports Podcast. I am your host, Neil Horowitz. You can find me on Twitter, NJH287. Hit me up on LinkedIn as well. Visit the website, dsmsports.net, where you can find more content episodes, and of course, follow the podcast on your preferred podcast platform. Super cool show for you guys today. Someone that I've been following his career for a bit. He is now doing great things for Clemson. My guest on the podcast today is Tyson Hutchins, Senior Director of Creative Solutions for Clemson Athletics. You might have heard of them. They are among the best in the social media space, and we get to pick Tyson's brain about how they do what they do at Clemson, as well as what he did previously with BYU Athletics. And so there's a fantastic conversation coming up with Tyson. But first, to open up this episode, sometimes we have a helpful tool. Sometimes we have a little opening rant. For this opening segment, I want to sort of revisit something that you'll hear from Tyson, as well as something that I posted about recently on my own social media platforms, and that's about working backwards. You're going to hear Tyson talk about that during the interview, and a portion of it. And what it means is looking for the content or the campaign or whatever it is that's in your head, that vision that you have, or that vision that you are looking at and seeing the final product, or seeing something that someone else did that was really cool, whether it's a campaign or a creative execution, a video, a TikTok video, whatever it might be, is to try and work backwards from that, because ideas are a dime a dozen. A lot of people can have ideas, but only the select few can actually execute those ideas. And what that takes is a plan that lays out what everyone needs to do, why you're doing it, what resources are required, approximately how long things will take if it's a longer term project, and ultimately being able to put together a plan. Most of us start out in the space as people that are doers. We're executing. We're shooting the photos, we're shooting the videos, we're doing the editing, we're creating the design, we're spending time in Adobe, we're writing the copy, etc., etc. And the people above us, or people that are our colleagues, are often the ones who are kind of project managing. Or as a social media person, you're often doing a little bit of everything, and part of that is managing a project and making something that's in your head come to life. And we may internalize some of that stuff, but as you grow in the space, you're going to be working with more creatives, other people that are helping you out. You might be managing a staff. You might be working with an agency, and it's important to be able to articulate ideas, be able to explain the what, the why, and the how we're going to make something happen, why it's going to be successful, and why it matters. So definitely a piece of advice that I give all the time, and I practice it myself as well, and again, alludes to something that Tyson will talk about in this interview. So when you see a piece of content that you really love, that's really cool, what do you think the creative brief looked like? Let's say you're working with a video production person, or a graphic designer, or a motion graphics person. How do you get that product? What would that creative brief look like in order to deliver that product? Same idea with a really cool campaign that you like, whether it's a sweepstakes or an ongoing brand campaign. What does that brief look like? What does that explanation look like and sound like to get to that final result? So think about it. Take a look. Next time you see something really cool that you really like, try to reverse engineer it and figure out what it took to get there. So stick around now for a fantastic interview with Tyson Hutchins of Clemson Athletics. Right back from this episode's opening segment, and I am so psyched for today's guest. I am in the mood for some spring sports. In the college world, spring sports are getting started for most of the country. Of course, we still got winter sports going, and football doesn't seem like it's that far away from getting going again in spring. But long story short, I am joined on the podcast today by Tyson Hutchins. He is the Senior Director for Creative Solutions for Clemson Athletics. You might have heard of them. Welcome to the podcast today, Tyson.
I appreciate you having me. I'm excited to be here.
It's going to be a great discussion. Clemson is known in a good way for being among the best in the game when it comes to social and creative, and you are a big part of that, and you also have been a big part of that at other programs as well, so it's like to pick your brain and learn from you. Before we get into the meat of our discussion, though, Tyson, tell us about you. Tell us about your career path, how you got started in the space, making the move from whether you did to Clemson, and any career tips for folks that want to do what you do.
You bet, yeah. Well, as mentioned, I currently am the Senior Director of Creative Solutions here at Clemson, Clemson Athletics. And so I'll give a little bit of my background of how I got here and kind of the journey along the way. And so I got my undergraduate degree at Brigham Young University in Provo, Utah. And the whole time I was going to BYU, I was pretty much planning to be an attorney. That was kind of the plan. I was a sociology major, was going to graduate and take the LSAT. And then on Twitter, I saw an internship with the athletic department, just like a social media intern. And I thought, yeah, this is interesting. I like social media. I was really active on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram at the time. And so I looked into it a little bit and reached out, and I actually was able to get the internship within athletics. And for a while I covered like men's and women's volleyball, the social media accounts for those sports at BYU, and very quickly realized how much I enjoyed it, and the social side of things, and as well the video side of things. I quickly after that started to get into video editing, and just that was kind of at the advent of Instagram adding video to their platform, and video within college athletics was really on the uptick. And I saw something there that I thought I could figure out, and was able to learn a lot. And very quickly after being at BYU, realized that I would much rather do this than be an attorney. And so I decided to go down this social path, and was fortunate enough to be able to get a full-time position at BYU following my graduation. Was able to work with the great crew that we had there, with Stuart Call and David Almadova, and some of the great mentors that I had at BYU. And then after a few years at BYU, was able to have the opportunity to take this job here at Clemson, and work with some of the best who have done it. So a lot of those folks that people reference as kind of being pioneers in the industry, like Jonathan Gatt and Jeff Callan, and my predecessor Nick Conklin, who I replaced. And so that's it in a nutshell. That was kind of a lot of word vomit, but that's how we got here.
That's super cool. And I mean, it's really inspiring to hear about that pivot when you're like, you know what, I'm not going to do law. Let's do the social and creative stuff instead. It seems more fun. When you were growing up, even, and whether before or during BYU, were you a generally creative minded person? Were you someone that was creating content, or was that really just like something that clicked on you when you were at BYU?
Man, that I'm always so envious when I listen to these podcast interviews with creative folks in the industry, and they're like, from the time I was in 5th grade, I've had a camera in my hands, and I've always loved this and that. And like, that was not the case for me at all. And for whatever reason, growing up, I kind of grew up in a very rural, small community, and played sports, and there just wasn't a lot of opportunity for some of the more creative fields and things like that growing up. And so for whatever reason, I just didn't really know it was an option, and I didn't give it a lot of thought until I was presented with the opportunity to do a little bit of it at BYU. And so I would say by standards, I learned the career path and the skills needed very late in life compared to a lot of other folks.
Hey, I can totally relate. I did not pick up a video camera or touch any editing software until I was a freshman in college, and all of a sudden I had to learn it, and it was so I can definitely relate, and it certainly came in handy as I got my career started as well. I'd love to hear about kind of where BYU athletics was at when you did take that first internship and eventually turned it into a job. You mentioned that video was becoming a bigger and bigger thing. How was BYU set up to create all that extra video? Like, were they relying on student workers, or was it a part of the strategy, or was it like a nice to have? Like, how did the social media department look, and how did the video kind of fit in at that point?
Yeah, it's a great question. My boss at BYU, Stuart Call, he's the director of social and digital at BYU. At the time when I was hired, he was the lone full-time social media employee, is what I would classify him as. And so he was kind of just doing it himself, bootstrapping different things. And we had a small army of students, and then we were able to quickly grow from there. And I was brought on full-time shortly after being a student. And since then, they've added two additional full-time people to his department, as well as kind of shifted some things around with the creative department as a whole to kind of make it more centralized. And so Really in the last like 5 to 10 years, we've been able to see just like a lot of tremendous growth at BYU. And I hope that some of my contribution was part of that. And me and Stuart are really good friends still and talk about a number of things. And so video had kind of, as I had mentioned, we have like a lot of really great folks at BYU who had done video, but more of like the traditional broadcast style video. When Instagram and some other platforms put a little bit more of an emphasis on video, we realized, oh man, we need to be a little more creative in the video assets that we create. And so that's kind of where I came in and kind of added a little bit more of a creative, quick hitting style of video to the department, and it kind of just grew from there.
Where did you get your inspiration from? At that point, where it was a lot of this more creative hype type video, less just like you said, broadcast style, starting to really emerge, and you're able to look at other teams, other schools. Or how did you kind of develop and say, okay, this is what we have now. We have the general like all 22 footage from practice that we can repurpose or whatnot. But let's this is where we should be going, where we can take it for a lot of reasons.
Yeah, it sounds surreal now, but Clemson is where kind of that started for me. I remember watching the national championship in, I think it was 2016, and just being completely floored with how they covered the game. The way that they were running around with mirrorless cameras and quick turning video assets, pre-game, post-game. They had video highlights from those angles immediately when the game ended. And I just, that was really eye-opening to me of where things were headed and the power that social and video had in recruiting and telling the story of your department. And so very shortly after that, maybe even before, to be honest, I reached out to Nick Conklin, who was my predecessor to the job I have here now, and just kind of picked his brain. I asked him about how they went about it, how their department was structured, and all those things. And Clemson has a really big, we still do, a really big reliance on students and allowing students to get a great educational opportunity while creating for the department. And so we at BYU kind of took that same model and began to build it up in a very similar way. And so I don't say that to blow smoke with my new employer, but Clemson was definitely the first inspiration for that for me.
Hey, I think you're not alone. I think many people like had their eyes opened with Clemson early on, and look, a lot of programs have come to raise themselves to a standard that Clemson helped set. So you're not alone there for sure. I love that you mentioned the recruiting aspect, which I think is not underappreciated. Everyone that works in college athletics really appreciates how important it is for creatives in college and for social in general. Maybe outside of college athletics, people don't realize how important it is. So what was that structure like at BYU or even at Clemson now as well, with divvying up creative resources and time and mind frame even, or mind share for recruiting aspects, recruiting purposes when it comes to content? And also, more importantly, I love to hear about kind of how the strategy gets fit in as well. Whereas like this might be what we're trying to do as a program as a whole, like for BYU athletics or Clemson athletics. And this is the vibe we're going for to try to capture the 18-year-olds that might be coming to play for us next year, or we're trying to close a deal with next year. Like, how does that fit in when you're trying to tell those stories, both to the general public, to donors, to potential students, and then also to the recruits that ultimately are maybe the most important audience in some ways?
Yeah, no question. It's a really good question and insight into kind of the background and the things that we do. For us here at Clemson, and when I was at BYU, is the same way. The lens that we try and look at things through is recruits first and foremost. We found, and it's really yet to fail me for the most part, is that if a recruit likes it, most likely the majority of the fan base is going to like it as well. And so we start through that lens of how does this affect the recruit? and we go from there. And so the question that we're trying to answer all the time, every single day, and every bit of content that we put out here at Clemson is what it's like to be a Clemson Tiger. And so if we're telling that story and doing it in an appropriate way, and so that recruits have a familiarity with Clemson before they ever step foot on campus, we've done our job. And what we've noticed is that that's when that ends up being the case, the overall fan base, the country as a whole, the individuals that we're trying to reach outside of recruiting, also that resonates with them really well. And so it's a trickle down approach that we've taken, and it's been really successful to this point. And that's not to say that at times you don't have to focus on selling tickets or sponsorship or anything like that, but when we kind of keep that, tell the story of what it's like to be a Clemson Tiger at the forefront of our mind, we seem to have a lot of success.
I love that. I was sitting here too thinking as you were laying out that response. Now, I remember being blown away early on with the Clemson football account on TikTok, and how you guys just did a tremendous job. Whoever it was that doing those that creating that content of really showing the life. I remember a particular TikTok, I think it was, where you had almost like an athlete POV, and you saw from breakfast till bedtime of kind of just what that view was like in a sped up motion, like TikTok style. And so really cool to hear you put it to words and to be able to see it play out in that sense as well. I love to get an idea of how that maybe has evolved or become more multifaceted over time, of what it means to have, like, of what that messaging is for Clemson for recruits, and to a lesser extent BYU, just because it's a little over a year or two ago now for you. Of this, we won't talk about NIL like specifically, but I want to talk about your brand, for your future, versus, so there's messages of you're going to have a kick-ass time at Clemson. There's great food, there's great facilities, lots of parties and social life and stuff to do. And there's also going to be you're going to become the best version of yourself as a student athlete. If you want to play in the pros, this is the place where you can accomplish that. And there might be, this is a place where you're going to be able to build a brand for life. So like, how much of it is this is an investment for your future versus this is where you want to go spend 4 years?
It's a good question. I in my opinion, it's both of those things. I mean, it's all encompassing. We like to showcase and portray all that Clemson has to offer, whether that's great facilities, great strength and conditioning, obviously great coaching and great on-field performance and all of those things. But then also we're going to show you our Paw Journey program within the football department, which is the professional development group that, they set up micro internships for our scholar athletes and are able to give them a lot of professional opportunities. And now we're getting into as NIL approaches, we begin to think about, how can we help leverage your brand while you're here at Clemson, and kind of the fruits that will come by being a part of a program like ours and having access to the resources that we do and that we offer. And so, for us, it's all encompassing, I guess. There's not one aspect of it that we kind of put more emphasis on more than others. We're trying to showcase the all encompassing reality of what it's like to be here.
Love that. Yeah. And obviously you're surrounded by real human stories. I mean, nothing more important on social than powerful storytelling. And you guys have at your disposal, hundreds of student athletes that are living out these stories that you guys are telling. So when you guys are looking to activate with student athletes, take me through the process of how you guys both find the story to tell within Clemson athletics. Who wants to work with you as far as the students, in terms of like, hey, someone might be an elite performer, but they may be a little bit bashful about being on camera or telling their story or being featured. And there might be some element with the coaches having input. So like, what goes into you guys identifying the stories that you want to amplify, as well as then how you go about executing those in a way that is comfortable and beneficial for the student athletes and the teams, as well as for the best content you guys can produce.
For sure. One of the things I love about Clemson, and it's a credit to those who have come before me. I have been able to yield the fruits of all of the people who have come before me and built these relationships. But one of the things I love about Clemson is very rarely do I have to sell something to a coach, to an administrator, to a department. They understand the value of what we do. And that's come from years and years worth of Jonathan and Jeff and Nick and our entire department, like putting emphasis and value on telling these stories. And so one of the things that I love about Clemson is that very rarely do we have to really sell something. The folks who are here, they're bought into what we're doing and the role that it plays. And that allows us to do some really cool things where, from the players to the equipment staff and everyone in between, they know that what our function is and how we can offer value to the department. And so when that's the case, they don't hesitate to let us know when there's a good story that needs to be told, or, one of the things that I really enjoy is I think at a lot of places, there might be 2 to 5 people that really come up with the storylines that should be told, from an athletic department. At Clemson, I think that number is probably somewhere between 10 to 20 of people who feel comfortable and confident pitching and talking about stories that should be told here at Clemson. And I think that's one of the reasons why you see the great content that we're able to produce. Is just because there are so many people thinking about how we can leverage and talk about the stories that we have at our disposal.
How does that play out? Is that like SIDs with you guys on a Slack channel saying, hey, or even creating a list at the beginning of the year saying, hey, this player helped, this student athlete helped do COVID research over the summer before the season started. Or this student athlete was in Antarctica doing research that was really interesting. We should talk about that. Like, how do these come to the surface so you guys even have those at your disposal?
It's a good question. There's definitely a little bit of that, kind of the traditional, SIDs making lists of great stories within their teams. There's definitely an element of that. There's also the recruiting element. We meet with our recruiting department within football every single week.
Yeah.
And they're very aware of a lot of things going on and great stories that we can tell or aspects that we should showcase that would benefit recruiting. And so I think it's a combination of things. Obviously, we try and have as great of communication as we can, but then also have those formal meetings where that's kind of the purpose of the meeting, is to try and determine what exactly we should do next, who we should talk about, what we should talk about, things like that.
Yeah, that totally makes sense, and I'm always glad to hear kind of the inner workings of how the actual operation works, because it's always these stories don't come out of nowhere, and it's cool to hear that trickle down effect a little bit, and the communication element, which is so key. When you guys are then looking at, I mean, not just the longer feature type stories and like student athlete profiles and whatnot, but just the everyday, hey, we're gonna do a sick graphic because this guy had 3 sacks last game, and so let's do a really cool execution, or a graphic that just showcases a player of the week or whatever it might be. Like, how are you guys ultimately judging success that, hey, we should continue to do these defense on fire graphics because they do really well, and whatever that might mean, or our time and resources with our creative team is better spent doing this instead, or spending time for this platform? Like, what ultimately helps determine when something is successful, based on just the response of that recruiting audience and the general audience as a whole?
I think, like everyone, we're far from perfect at determining those things. I think we can be a lot better about applying our resources appropriately and things like that. But with that said, I think it's a combination of, we at times will create something that we expect to do numbers, just from a very generic social analytics standpoint. We expect it to perform and do well. And so there's that aspect of it. But then there's also the aspect of, we created this thing for a very specific audience, and we're going to get feedback about this thing from that very specific audience. Obviously, recruits is the one that comes to mind most often, but it might be, Clemson alumni or season ticket holders or things like that. And we'll probably get feedback from them in alternate forms that may or may not show up in the numbers that we see on our social analytic dashboards. And so it's a combination of those things, I think, where we definitely pay attention to the performance of our accounts and what content works and what doesn't, and how we can refine that strategy. But then also at times where we're trying to meet a very specific audience and we go to them directly, and we don't so much care about everything else, how it performs, as long as the answer that audience needs is there.
Totally makes sense. Yeah, that's a good way to think about it. Not everything is meant for every audience, and your analytics can tell you a lot, but there's also a lot that they can't tell you as well when it comes to that stuff. One question I have too, of some of that stuff that might be very less trackable, is how much happens behind the scenes that we may not that may never see the light of public day, whether it's a text message sent to a recruit or a DM with a video or a graphic. How much of that is in college athletics in general that we may not know about, as well as speaking to your experience at BYU and at Clemson?
There's definitely a ton of that. There's a ton of that goes on. We here at Clemson, we're kind of structured where in some roles there are internal creative roles and external creative roles, where someone's sole focus might be those types of internal direct communications. And that doesn't mean that they don't bleed over at times, but there's obviously a very big emphasis on that and the amount of communication that we need to make on a regular basis. And so we, and as far as I know, everyone else who's dedicated to kind of trying to build a creative and recruiting department like we are obviously focused on both the external but also the internal direct communication.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I appreciate you indulging me. I love the inside baseball stuff like that you may not know about that's happening behind the scenes. There's a lot more content being produced than I'll ever even see the light of public day, which is incredible to me.
That's very inside baseball. That is true. There's a lot of that going on.
A few minutes up here with Tyson Hutchins, the Senior Director of Creative Solutions with Clemson Athletics. I want to hear a little about just one more thing around kind of this Gen Z recruit, right? Ultimately the recruits and the younger people that might be applying to Clemson as well. As you start to, you're still a pretty young man. As you get older, how do you guys try to keep up with the space? I mean, I'm sure having the student workers certainly helps, but when it comes to having your finger on the pulse of what that generation cares about, all both pop culture wise, as well as what platforms they like and how they like to consume content. How much of it is kind of trusting your gut, trusting how you learn outside of whether it's external publications, podcasts, etc., as well as talking to students and trying to trust them and learn from them as well?
Yeah, that's a great question, especially as I get older. I ask myself that question a lot, where it may take me a little bit longer to be tapped into some of these things, but one of the great things that we have, and you mentioned it, is we have a great student workforce that is really tapped into a lot of great things. And so we try and make sure that we're utilizing them and not just, giving them busy work or things like that, but they have the opportunity to create and do some really great things and be innovative. And then on top of that, we have, hundreds of student athletes here on campus. And so we try and pay attention to the things that they're paying attention to. What are they doing? Are they streaming on Twitch? Are they on TikTok now? Are they on Instagram? How much do they interact with various types of content? And we talk to them about it. Just this last week, we invited a player to be in one of our meetings to kind of hear what we're talking about. And they offered input that we hadn't considered and we should and need to. And so it's definitely an assortment of things to try and pay attention to the industry as a whole, but then also utilize these people that we have here who can offer so much.
Super cool. Yeah, it totally makes sense. You are, whenever I meet a young person, I always tell people like that's my mini focus group. If I have a cousin who is 22 years old, I'm gonna pick that person's brain and see what's going on with the 22-year-olds these days. Because as you get more removed, you definitely become the not boomer, not okay boomer yet, you and me, but I'm getting closer than you are.
Yeah, it feels like I'm getting increasingly close day by day, unfortunately.
I want to talk a little about being at Clemson. I mean, you are at like almost the mecca of SM sports in some ways, and making that move from BYU to Clemson as well, both in terms of the sheer size of the staff, of the budget, of the demand for content, as well as just the amount of national conversation that already happens around Clemson. Not that BYU doesn't have some national conversation, but not to the volume and degree that especially Clemson had during their championship years. And it's just tell me about that transition and what it's even like to go to a program with a that kind of reputation, a well-defined history and fan base to a part of the country that you're not as familiar with. What was it like making that transition, and both in terms of resources as well as just learning their system and learning the school and the culture and the fans?
Yeah. When I worked at BYU, I went to BYU obviously and was able to get a full-time job at BYU, and I grew up a BYU fan and all of these things. And, I used to joke around with my wife. I'd say, there aren't very many jobs that I think I want other than the one I have right now. And then I would kind of jokingly say, unless Clemson offers me a job, I would jokingly say that, that's a legitimate thing that I used to joke about. And so to know that, to then now being able to actually have the opportunity, I feel really, really lucky and really, really blessed to be able to work at and now influence a place that inspired me so much early in my career. And so I'm very grateful for that opportunity. As for the differences and how things have kind of evolved, one of the things that I was very fortunate with as well is we had a very similarly structured department at BYU to what we have here at Clemson. And so I was able to kind of jump into that and very quickly kind of figure out some of the nuances of it and the differences, but also the similarities and get to work from there. And so, there is a heightened awareness of just how many eyeballs we have on us and on our accounts and on our student athletes and all of those things. It definitely takes an adjustment, where you got to really be on your toes to make sure that we're portraying the program in the appropriate light at all times, and our student athletes and everyone involved. And obviously there's a wealth of resources here at Clemson and a foundation established, and that's all great. But one of the things that I really pride myself on and try to is to just continue to build on that great foundation that so many of those folks who I've mentioned on this call have started at Clemson. Everyone from the students that we've had in the past who have now gone on to be industry leaders to the individuals who were full-time and have done various things. That's what I'm really trying to focus on, is just making sure that I continue that great legacy of digital, social, all these things that Clemson has been known for so long.
I love it. I'm gonna let you sing the praises a little bit more too, just because I'm curious and I'm a fanboy to some degree of Jonathan Gant and all he's built there. He was kind of this forward thinking leader for a while, and it shows in what you guys have been able to produce with Clemson athletics over the years before and after and during your time there as well. So what do you think it is that has allowed Clemson and Jonathan to really be this innovators in the space? I mean, maybe it comes down from the AD and encouraging experimentation. I know we've heard over the years that having the student workers really helps Clemson both produce a lot of output as well as stay on top of kind of more creative things in the space. What can we learn as a group from Jonathan, from Clemson, from Jeff, from Nick before you, that we can take away to our own jobs?
Yeah, there's just a wealth of experience that is hard to come by these days, where someone can have, upwards of 10 years of social media experience, and not only that, but being able to have worked in multiple CFPs and national championships. And just when that is the case, there's so much experience that comes from that. And it is a pleasure to be able to work with the folks that we have here, as well as, from the football side of things, the recruiting department, those guys, Jordan Sorrells and DJ Gordon and some of those people who, DJ was the one who he worked in the equipment room and kind of was doing some things on social media that then led to what Jonathan started doing. And there are just so many people here at Clemson who have such a wealth of experience, and just a group of people who have been really observant and smart and gone about things the right way. And I think if there's anything to take away, it's just, making sure that you go about things the right way and making smart, scalable decisions along the way that allow success in the long term. That's something that we think a lot about is, we can do some things, but what are the repercussions of that going to be? Is that thing going to be replicatable? Does it need to be? Do we need to now offer that to all of our student athletes or things like that? And so we give those things a lot of thought, and that comes from that experience and knowledge that so many of those folks who I mentioned have been able to build up here at Clemson.
I love it. That's. I want to say it's a good place for us to cut off, but I do want to ask you just a couple more minutes. I'm looking at the terrible stat. I promise we're almost there. But I want to hear a little about. You mentioned even earlier mirrorless cameras, and in my head I was making the joke around the 8K cameras that Fox is using now. That was all over Twitter when those debuted. That was everyone was correcting the mistakes, of course, that ESPN was making even. But I want to hear about. We wear a lot of hats in social, of course. Your analytics, your design, your creative, your strategy, your copywriting. But part of that is knowing the hardware, frankly, and knowing what equipment is needed to produce the best possible content using the limited budget you guys may have and resources you have. It's like how do you guys manage having someone, whether it's yourself or others, that really are on top of all the technology, both at the broadcast level, be able to do a Periscope or a Facebook Live or Instagram Live, as well as knowing what camera equipment to have, what lighting equipment you need. Like, how does that fit in with social, especially as social media creative has become more on the front lines of content production in the last few years here?
Yeah, one of the things that we try and do is work backwards from the type of content that we're trying to create, and that drives a lot of our decisions as far as resources and equipment and things like that go. And so, there was a time where we wanted to have 4 cinema cameras on the field and get all of the great, awesome 8K looking footage that we could get, and then when the pandemic happened, we were limited in what we could have on the field, and so we began with a couple cinema cameras and someone with a mirrorless camera, but also I was running like a cell phone rig on my mirrorless camera, and so that we could kind of dual capture some things. And what we were able to learn is that when you work backwards from the type of content that you want to create, you're able to really make some smart decisions as far as how to utilize your resources and utilize them appropriately. And so that was something that had occurred because of the pandemic, but something that we'll probably continue to really focus on is, what is the best tool for the job? Or, one of the things is, we talk about these 8K cameras and things like that, but if it's up to me, like, we're going to have a credential for someone who's just with a cell phone and able to capture things with their iPhone, just because that's its own style of content that does so well on social and for good reason. And so we try and not get too caught up in the aesthetic of it all, but what people actually want to see, and we'll try and give them that.
Totally. Yeah. It's like it goes, you so often see some of the best performing content doesn't take a $20,000 camera. It's just being in the right moment, capturing the right emotion. And sometimes the stuff that looks like it came from a phone or did come from a phone is often the better stuff, because it has that verisimilitude, that authenticity that you can't get elsewhere. One last thing, because you started mentioning a little bit, was just the pandemic overall and having to maybe make decisions around how can we best deploy the 2 people we're going to have on site. or we can only have this much, or even this is how we can better serve the fans who are all stuck at home. Like, what are some of the takeaways that you have from spending a year amidst COVID while college athletics are still happening, let alone your first full year at Clemson as well?
Yeah. First and foremost, I got to shout out kind of our game day crew that we had. We at Clemson in the past have had as many as 10 people on the field working an event, from photographers to videographers and things like that. And all of a sudden, we had 4 credentials that we were able to work with, and so. Myself, Carly Goff, Maddie Williams, and David Platt, we made the most of those 4 credentials. David was dedicated to photos. Maddie shot hybrid photos and videos from like the box. I shot hybrid video and like cell phone footage, and Carly was dedicated to video. And we just ran around like crazy people and made the most of it. And man, I'm incredibly proud of the work that we were able to do this year, despite the limited resources. And it was a great learning experience for us. And there are aspects of it that we'll take into future years, pandemic or not, and just trying to make the most of all of the opportunities that we have. There were times where it wasn't ideal to shoot this on our phone, or it wasn't ideal for me to take this picture with my iPhone or with my camera that wasn't quite set up for photo the way that I would want, but we had to make the most of it, and I'm really proud of what we were able to do despite the limited resources.
I love that. I think we are. No one is in a position where they would not want more resources or another content creator on site, and to be able to say, okay, this is what we have to work with. This is the most we can do. Let's figure out the best way to deploy these limited resources to get the best outcome, the best content. That's really, really inspiring. I'm glad you guys managed this, despite the challenges, of course. But we're going to have some more fun with you, Tyson. I feel like we can keep on going forever because I feel like we just started talking. It just kept on going in a good way. But we're going to be able to have some more fun in our Tiger Track segment. But first, this episode's shareable stat, and we'll be right back with that. Fantastic chat with Tyson Hutchins, Senior Director of Creative Solutions for Clemson Athletics. We're going to have some more fun with Tyson coming up in our Tiger Tracks segment. But first, this episode's shareable stat. This episode's shareable stat comes from the recent Snapchat Investor Day. I think it was their first Investor Day as a public company. And they dropped a couple of stats about their reach, about their demographics. I'll share those stats with you. That's the episode's shareable stats, is that they reach 90% of 13 to 24-year-olds in the U.S. That's a stat that you may have heard before. It continues to be one of their strongest stats, is being able to reach that 13 to 24-year-old demographic at such a high concentration. Along with that stat, though, is that 80% of their total reach comes from people that are over the age of 18. So it's almost a little bit contradictory when you think about it, but it's a matter of volume and a matter of just the sheer number of people. So they're reaching a high concentration of young people in the U.S., 13 to 24-year-olds, again, 90% of them. But if you look at the big picture, the 80% of their audience, 8 out of every 10 users that are using the app every day or using the app frequently are over the age of 18. So what does that mean? It means that, yes, Snapchat is still a very great way to reach Gen Z. TikTok maybe as well. Instagram maybe as well. YouTube maybe as well. There's plenty of platforms out there. But when you're looking at that goal of we want to reach this demographic, pay attention to the stats because, yes, you don't want to rely on reputation. Snapchat does have a great reputation for reaching that young audience, and the stats back it up. But stats also say that all that reach that you're getting may be going to an older audience. That's not necessarily a bad thing, just something to be aware of. And really, when you're having to pick and choose where you're going to spend time and resources across platforms for content, for unique content, it's important to understand, what is the goal here? Are we reaching that goal? Are we reaching that audience that we desire to reach? So pay attention to the post level analytics, to the account level analytics, and try to make sure you're getting the most bang for your buck, and you're not just going on gut, but you're actually able to see, yes, this is accomplishing what we thought it would accomplish for us. So that's a shareable stat. Always interesting to see what all the platforms are doing, and with Snapchat dropping those latest stats, again, in the United States, Snap reaches 90% of 13 to 24-year-olds. But if you look overall, 80% of Snapchat's reach is for of people over the age of 18. All right, at this episode's shareable stat, think about it, ponder it, discuss it, but stick around for the Tiger Tracks segment with Tyson Hutchins of Clemson Athletics. Right back from this episode's shareable stat, and I am joined again on the podcast by Tyson Hutchins. He is the Senior Director of Creative Solutions for Clemson Athletics. Tyson took us to school, did a tremendous job on the interview portion. Are you now ready for some Tiger Tracks?
You bet. Let's do it.
All right. I feel like Tiger Tracks should be like an ice cream flavor now. I feel that should exist. Maybe it does. All right, number one. Tell me what is your MVP app? Your MVP mobile app, most valuable mobile app when it comes to content creation on the go.
This is going to be super basic, but I could not do my job without Lightroom Mobile. So we'll just stick with something. Well, actually, I take that back. We'll go the Box app, like Dropbox, the cloud service. That's how we deliver the majority of our stuff, and I'm constantly in there. And so we'll go the Box app, but Lightroom Mobile as a quick second.
Lightroom is definitely one that I've heard before and is on my list as well. But yeah, you took a curveball there with Box. You got to be able to share that easily somehow between all the creators. All right, number two. Going back to your time in Provo, BYU, tell me the most memorable game during your time as a student or employee at BYU.
Oh man, there were some good ones. I was able to be at BYU in a really great time. We beat a ranked USC at home, and the crowd. We kind of won in dramatic fashion in overtime. There was a interception to end the game, and the fans stormed the field, and it was like the ESPN game of the day or whatever. And so it was a really great time, and that's definitely got to be it. BYU versus USC. I believe it was in 2019. So that was definitely the most memorable.
Oh, that's awesome. So who was mostly the QBs there? Were you there for Max Hall, or that he's before your time?
No, not. I wasn't quite that early, and so I was pretty much Tanner Mangum through Zach Wilson. So that was pretty much
not bad at all. A couple of very accomplished quarterbacks.
Yeah, absolutely.
Number three. Now bouncing up to Clemson. Tell me your favorite piece of content that Clemson has produced during your time there so far.
I've got to go with the. Over the summer, we remade the Drake "Laugh Now, Cry Later" music video, and it popped off and has over 1 million views on YouTube. And Drake recognized it and DM'd us about it. And
wow,
just a really awesome experience. Special shout out to Maddie Williams and Carly Goff from our staff, as well as our recruiting staff, who helped a ton with all the coordination of that. That was a very memorable piece of content.
That's so cool. I really cannot even begin to imagine what it's like when Drake pops up in the DMs. Like, wow.
Yeah. I won't forget it either. When you swipe over to the DMs and it says Champagne Poppy, it's memorable, to say the least.
Number four, we touched on this a little bit, so maybe I'll frame the question a little differently. But looking back at 2020 with the pandemic, what are some things that we can talk about key takeaways again, but we kind of talked about that a little bit in our interview. So, what are maybe one or two things that were different during the pandemic that you think will stick around post pandemic? And you can take that however you like, whether it's a content, an engagement, an execution strategy.
I think there are probably two things. One is the way we communicate as a team. You know, we really took for granted being able to be in a row of offices and a conference room where we could, run down and ask someone a question or plan something. And so we were able to implement some better communication structures and things to be able to make us better as a team. And then as well, we quickly learned how difficult it is to do our jobs when you don't have access to footage readily available to you remotely. And so we are still in the process of making that a better structure, but those are a couple of key takeaways that are 100% staying after the pandemic.
Super interesting to hear. I like that. Number five. This should be a fun one, and this might be a hard one too. So you can give multiple if you need to. But tell me the pro sports team whose social media content inspires you and why.
Oh man, there are so many good ones out there. I'm gonna have to give a special shout out to the folks at the Chargers. One of my really good friends, Alex Farkas, who used to be at Ohio State, works there now, and I just think they do such an incredible job of being creative and making sure that they don't just repurpose the same mundane things, but being really creative in how they go about portraying their team and going about it. But man, you are correct that there are so many teams who do an incredible job across the NBA and the NFL. The threshold for just really, really high end work is so high at the moment. So many people do great stuff.
Yeah, the Chargers are a good one. They're very they know their strategy and they own it. And yeah, to your point, like I think I even put this in our pre-interview notes of how really right around the time you entered the industry, it just feels like everything went up to another level in terms of graphic design and video and production value, and it's only gotten better since then. And there's no going back now. You got to have just incredible talent and skills to be able to produce this content, and luckily there's a lot of it in the sports space and beyond.
Yeah, absolutely, there definitely is. There's so many. I scroll through my feeds these days, and I'm just like, man, everyone from your kind of smaller Power 5 school to a G5 school to all the NBA and the NFL and Major League Baseball and the leagues themselves. So many folks are doing so much good work out there.
Hell yeah. They're thumb stopping content everywhere, man.
No question.
Number 6, tell me, I always like this question. Your favorite social media mantra or guiding principle. What's something that really sticks with you when it comes to producing creative or just social media in general?
This is something that it's actually a phrase from Nike that they kind of use internally. And when I was at BYU, we went and did some professional development at Nike and were able to talk to some folks. And one of the things that they said that I've kind of implemented into how I think about things is they kind of have a mantra, a phrase that they say, win when the world is watching, and so you can take that to mean a lot of different things, in some ways, the world is always watching. And so that's important. But then also, you think about us here at Clemson, we've been fortunate enough to be in some big time scenarios when literally the world is watching, and that's when we need to win and be on our game and be prepared with, some home runs and different things. And so that's something that I always try and think about, and something that I try and instill in our folks is, there's a lot of minutia, there's a lot of noise going on, but when the world's watching, we need to make sure that we win.
Yeah, it's great. And the world is watching Clemson quite a bit these days. So
yeah, I quickly learned that rarely is the world not watching around here.
Number 7 for you, Tyson. This should be an interesting one. Tell me the social platform or type of content, however you want to take it, that you most enjoy creating for, and the one that is most challenging, and why?
It's the same answer for both, and we're gonna go with TikTok at the moment. We and for years everyone has kind of repurposed the same content across all of their social platforms. Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, everything kind of fits within those things. And currently, TikTok does not do that. That isn't something that we're able to do. And so I love TikTok for that it's a unique way to tell stories and to go about certain things. And so it's also a challenge though, and something that we're trying to embrace and figure out. And so we'll continue to do that, but yeah, I'm going to go TikTok for both.
I love that answer. It's so true too. And I think what's interesting to watch is how some leagues, teams, properties, whatever, feel like they still, like, TikTok still has to be a box that's checked when you're planning an event. And hey, we have this game this weekend, so we got to make sure we do a TikTok around this game. And yet the feed itself isn't always chronological. So like you can almost just plan out TikTok content based on wherever creative juices start flowing or whatnot, instead of saying, hey, we have to have TikTok content for this event that's a time-sensitive event. So that's something interesting to me, that it's a place where evergreen content really, really does thrive.
Yeah, Yeah, no question. That's really well said.
Number 8. This is time for our food question, Tyson. We always ask food question on here. So tell me if I head out to Provo, tell me the best meal to get there and where to go get it, as well as now in your limited time in Clemson, where the restaurant's actually open, the best meal in Clemson so far and where to get it.
You know what's interesting about this is these two answers are related a little bit. So both are barbecue. My two favorite barbecue places, one is in Provo and one is in Clemson that I've ever had. I'm going to give a shout out to Bam Bam's Barbecue in Provo. Love that place. And then here in Clemson, there's the world famous Smoke and Pig barbecue, and so those are the two places that I'm going to say that if you go to either place, you need to make sure you hit those.
Ooh. How different is the sauce in Provo versus Clemson?
The sauce.
You always hear about like vinegar base versus tomato versus mustard.
That's a good question. You know, I haven't been able to tell too much of a difference. Apparently, not apparently. I know this for a fact. My Cam, who owns Bam Bam's Barbecue in Provo, he went and did like his barbecue apprenticeship in Texas, and so he's kind of has that Texas barbecue style.
Okay.
You know, the potato salad and things like that go along with the barbecue. And here I think it's probably a little bit more vinegar based, but I hope no one quotes me on that because I am not well versed enough in barbecue to know.
Hey, as long as it tastes good, that's the most important thing, really.
Yeah, absolutely, and I can confirm it does taste great.
Number 9. Tell me the most impressive student athlete that you saw during your time at BYU and at Clemson so far. And you can take that however you want. Impressive on the field, off the field, or wherever you'd like.
Well, you know, I was able to meet a lot of really impressive people at both places. You know, impressive student athletes both at Clemson and at BYU, and have been really fortunate to work with a lot of great people. As far as on the field, you know, it's interesting. They may be the 1 and 2 overall picks, but I got to say that Zach Wilson at BYU and Trevor Lawrence here at Clemson, both two of the most impressive athletes I've ever seen in my life, and as well as people too. That's one of the great things about both of them is they were some of the best people to work with as well as the best performers on the field.
That's so cool. It's going to be so cool for the NFL draft this year to see both those guys get drafted and know that you were along for the ride in some way. That's so cool. All right, last one for you, Tyson. Tell me the social media or content trend that you most have your eye on for the coming year.
Well, I would say TikTok, but we already mentioned that. I think that type of storytelling will continue, where you know it's high quality content, but it might not be captured with the most high quality of equipment. I think that will continue. But as far as, since we've talked a lot about TikTok already, I'm going to go with I think we'll continue to see more mixed media, and I what I mean by that is we'll see. You know, the utilization of graphics and photos and video all within one type of content, you know, with the advent of, you know, 3D elements and Cinema 4D and some of these things, you're really able to kind of see what mixed media can be. And I think we'll continue to see that.
It's really, really thoughtful answer. I like that a lot. And I think you're spot on too. All right, Tyson, you kicked ass for your Tiger Tracks. Did an amazing job. We will work on making it into ice cream flavor eventually. But now your chance to take over the podcast for a bit and tell us your social media all-star to follow. Just tell us what platform they're on, who they are, and why they're worth following.
So there is actually, he's assistant athletic director at Harvard in video. I don't even know his exact title, but his name's Imry, IMRY. If you just search his name on Twitter, I'm sure you'll be able to find him. Yeah. He's one of my favorite follows on social media. He offers a lot of technical advice, but also, you know, how to be a better manager and to conduct yourself as a professional in the business and things like that. And so I'm going to give him the shout out.
That's a great one. I've been following his career for a while. I want to say, I'm not sure I pronounce his last name, Halevi, but we'll link it up in the show notes. So, but that's a great one. And how about you, Tyson? Where can we find you, as well as all things Clemson athletics on digital and social? Where do you want to send the listeners?
Well, you can find me. It's pretty much at Tyson Hutchins. If you search that on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, all the places, you'll be able to find me. I don't think there's another Tyson Hutchins out there. And then as well, follow Clemson football, as well as our Clemson Tigers accounts, and whatever else you're into, whether that's soccer or softball or anything in between. We have a great group of people who are doing great work across all of our platforms here at Clemson.
Heck yeah. I mean, I don't need to say it because it goes without saying, but Clemson really is among the best in the business when it comes to content and social. And it's great to be able to pick the brain of Tyson, who's a big part of that now. And before that was doing some really good work that caught my eye as well, BYU. And I really appreciate you coming on the podcast today. It's never a slow time, and sports are in full swing. And really appreciate you sharing some knowledge with us today, Tyson.
You bet. Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Again, what a great time talking with Tyson Hutchins, Senior Director of Creative Solutions for Clemson Athletics. Really enjoyed picking his brain. Really fun guy to talk to, and someone who is really still young in the space and already doing some phenomenal things with Clemson Athletics. And it'll be fun to keep an eye on the Tigers and what they continue to do in the space. But that'll do it for this episode of the Digital and Social Media Sports Podcast. Thanks again for downloading and listening. I am your host, Neil Horwitz. I would love to hear from you. Hit me up on Twitter at NJH287, on Instagram as well, or LinkedIn, or the website, dsmsports.net, where you can contact me and also check out more content episodes. And, of course, follow the podcast on any of your preferred podcast platforms and spread the word. Share it, because there's some great stuff, and I'm lucky to talk to some great people in the greater sports media, sports business, social industry. Until next time, this is Neil Horwitz signing off for the Digital and Social Media Sports Podcast.